بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا Muhammad. This is lesson 6 of the introduction to the Tarbawi Tafsir entitled Divine Trust. To recap, we spoke of the role of Muslim scholars in the triumph of the Ummah, the role of the scholar teacher in elucidating for the student the placing of the subject domain within the grander scheme of the Sharia, and to shorten the distance of the learning journey. We spoke of the pre-beginnings of sacred knowledge, which is to be a worshipper and fulfill the basic duties of a Muslim, and the importance of keeping the standard of sacred knowledge and scholarship at the caliber that it deserves, as opposed to dragging it down to the level of the negligent and complacent. We spoke of the stages of studentship and scholarship, and of the critical difference between mastery-based and completion-based models of learning. We spoke of resigning the Muslim generality to the curse of mediocrity, namely, a lack of awareness of the breadth and depth of real scholarship and the deep dysfunction caused by those religious figures that pander to this mentality. Finally, we spoke of the necessity of breaking this cycle to uphold divine trust and to guide Muslims properly upon the straight path. At this point, we mention a foundational maxim on the path of sacred knowledge. It is derived from Allah's words, رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْوَهَّابُ. O my Lord, do not cause our hearts to go astray after having guided us, and grant us from you a mercy. Indeed, you are a bestower. Surah Ali Imran, verse 8. Let us examine a question. What is it? What is that factor that ultimately renders a student of knowledge of today a scholar of the hereafter tomorrow? It is very simple. Fear of God. Taqwa. At any point on this path, complacency breeds a spiritual blind spot, and this is where outer and inner knowledge diverge, and it is a very dangerous trap. Knowledge calls to action. If the latter responds, the former responds. If it declines, the former dissipates. Thus, every true student of knowledge must carry this verse in their heart at all times. The three main points of adab in the verse are as follows. The seeker of knowledge must recognize the divine favor in their path. The seeker of knowledge must have chosen the path out of a conviction that it is more precious than all the world and what it contains. The seeker of knowledge must have fear of losing it if they do not uphold its trust. If any of these elements of adab are missing, the learning is flawed, and it is feared that eventually the seeker will be led astray by the very thing they think is guiding them. Personal blessings carry an individual divine trust, whereas scholarship carries a collective divine trust. So, it is a matter even more grave than wealth and time and health, because ruining those trusts will ruin your life, but ruining the trust of sacred knowledge will ruin the entire Ummah. This is why the scholars of this Ummah, the scholars of the hereafter, are its guardians, because they have undertaken a path that is fundamentally different than others. They have dedicated their individual lives to the collective. This entails great sacrifice. So, when those who have something to profit from speaking of religion become its fake guardians, then religious figures essentially become like politicians pandering to their constituents. Influencers become spiritual guides, and our religion becomes occupied territory. And in this scheme of things, True scholars are silenced, imprisoned, and oppressed. Does it sound familiar? May God grant relief to Palestine and all of the Ummah of our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Perhaps now the reason I mentioned the scholars who wrote works in captivity in the very first lesson of this series has become clear. When we truly value something, we don't take it for granted. Beware of taking God for granted. As we stand at the doors of Ramadan, before we embark on the greatest study of all, the study of the Book of Allah, let this be clear. May God's choicest mercy be upon the mujtahid imams of this ummah and all the scholars who formed the edifice of our tradition through knowledge, piety, practice, and struggle. May He grant us the tawfiq, the success to follow in their way. May He grant us the ability to fulfill divine trust. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alih walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.